Y'all, today we are beginning a new series that we really hope will scratch an itch where many of you that you face living in the woodlands. You know, I'm an outsider, and as an outsider coming in on occasion, the woodlands has a kind of fairy tale feel to it. For 2 years now, you know it's been voted the number one place to live in America, and even though 127,000 people live here, it still has kind of a small town feel to it. It's wooded, it has its green spaces, its trails, its parks, its lakes, its restaurants, shops, business, health care, awesome schools and extracurricular activities for the kids. It's diverse, and yet it has a kind of cohesiveness to it, if you live in the woodlands, that people love. I think this is why so many young families, parents want to raise their children here. I think it's why so many who have retired want to live out their days here. It's just a great place to live and do life. But you guys know that life is ultimately not about where you live. It's about how you live where you live. And so in this series called Rhythms, we're going to ask the question, how does being a Jesus follower help us bring order to the chaos of our lives? How does it help us bring rhythm? And does it actually do that? Today in week 1, we're going to identify the problem, and there is the real possibility that you're going to leave here today wholly unsatisfied with what I am about to do, and I'm okay with that. It's by design. Next week, we're going to propose the solution, and we're going to unpack that solution in some detail. And then in weeks 3, 4, and 5, we're going to apply that solution to the area of our finances, our families, and our work. And our goal in this series is to try to help you manage life from the perspective of being a Jesus follower. Because as we said a few weeks ago, when we talked about what it means to follow Jesus, we said that if we do that, that Jesus will make you better at life, and because of that, your life will get better. And so over the next 5 weeks, we want to see if that may actually be true in this series. Linda and I bought our first small property that we ever owned. We bought it in London, Texas in 2016. I had a dream of raising 60 acres of hay on our 125-acre ranch there, or ranchette, because America is in need of farmers. You may not know this. You and I, we go to H-E-B, we buy all the food we want, Costco, wherever you shop, Trader Joe's. But I don't know if you're aware of the fact that the average farmer in America is now almost 59 years old, and their kids aren't coming behind them. And that means the people who raise all the food that you and I eat, they're passing off the scene. It's a big, big issue. And so I thought, you know what? I'm going to contribute to the food chain, because those who know me know that I eat a fair amount of the food chain. But y'all, I had no idea how to raise hay. Now, in high school, I had hauled a lot of hay, but I'd never raised it. I'd never baled it. And so there's a lot more to it than just cutting grass. In fact, to get into a hay operation, to buy a tractor and a swather and a rake and a baler, and to set up irrigation and to build new barns and to get your trailers in place, all of that at a minimum is a $350,000 investment. Well, I remember about 2 weeks into owning this property, I woke up one night absolutely overwhelmed with anxiety. And I know this may happen to some of you fairly often. It almost never happens to me. And I woke up and I thought to myself, what in the world have I done? I've bought this property, but I don't know what I'm doing. And I'm telling you, it was palpable. My heart was racing. My mind was spinning. I had no idea what I was going to do and how I was going to manage the chaos that I was feeling. I was in over my head, and I did not know how to solve the problem I was facing. Ever feel like that? If you have, you know that it's not a good feeling. And you may be aware of how quickly that feeling can kind of overwhelm you. Your marriage seems like it's doing fine until suddenly you feel distant from one another and you start going your separate ways, even though you live in the same household. Work has been great until one day you get there and it's like, I don't know what changed, but I don't like coming here. I don't like my job. I don't like what I'm doing. But you don't have any choice. You got to stay engaged because it pays the bills. And there's a lot of those. Your kids are doing well, but then something switches with them. Maybe they reach a certain age. Maybe something happens in school. You're not even sure what, but now they're a problem. And your kids have never been a problem, but they are now. Your finances have been reasonable, but then after a pandemic and inflation and a possible recession, all of a sudden you're under financial duress. The anxiety level is going up. You feel it. What went wrong? How do I fix it? In Luke chapter 12, verse 22, Jesus said to his disciples, "Therefore I tell you, do not be anxious about your life, what you will eat, nor about your body, what you will put on." Now, obviously, if Jesus told us not to be anxious, that's really good advice. But sometimes it's not easy to not be anxious. So what is the source of the anxiety that wakes us up at night? Well, there are three things that we all possess in limited amounts. We all possess time, energy, and resources. This is what you have available to you to live life. But time is limited. We all have the same amount of time, but there's still only 24 hours a day. And of course, the big question about time is what are you doing with the time that you have? Energy is limited. Unlike time, we don't all have the same amount of energy. And the older you get, the more you're aware of that. And then there is a direct correlation, we are told, between anxiety and the loss of energy. And so the more anxious you are in life, the less energy you seem to have to cope with your anxiety. And then, of course, our resources are limited. We have limited mental resources. Some are more intelligent than others. Some are more educated than others. Some have more life experience than others. But none of us knows everything. Not only that, we have limited financial resources. In an article by Andrea Bass, she says that 70% of Americans say that they don't earn enough money. 72% feel like they haven't saved or invested enough money for their future. 66% feel like they don't have enough money for health-related expenses. And even 55% of people in America say that they feel like they don't have enough money for their housing expenses. Most people wish they had a little more money. And we know that most people think if I just had about twice what I actually make, I'd be fine. We have limited human resources. The old saying goes that you don't have to know everything. You just have to know someone who knows what you don't know and then get them to help you. But that means you need friends. Now, some of you are really good at making friends. And then there's a bunch of you in the room that, if you were just to be honest, you really don't like people all that much. You know, there's that famous saying about church, I love church. It's the people I can't stand. And people can be a real pain. But y'all, all of us know deep down, we could really use a few more friends. So we all have time, we all have energy, we all have a variety of resources, but they are all limited. And there is no getting around that fact, and it leads to the second reality of life. Most people want to live a meaningful life. By meaningful, what we mean is that most of us would like to have a good reason to get out of bed in the morning. Most of us would like to live some kind of a life that is purposeful, significant, valuable, worthwhile. And we do define that differently, but regardless of how you define it, most people would like to have some kind of significant reason to live. Otherwise, your life ends up becoming boring and perhaps even depressing. But it is these two realities, the desire for a significant life together with the limited resources that we have, that creates the tension of our lives. How do I generate the most meaningful life possible with these few limited resources that I have available to me? And this is the problem that every person is trying to solve, whether you would say it that way or not. And that brings us to the third reality of life, and that is that every person has to manage what you've got to make the most of your life. Now, practically speaking, life is about managing your limited time, energy, and resources. You do this every single day. And we're not all equally good at managing them, are we? We all have to do it, but we're not all equally good at it. And so, to the degree that you manage your time, energy, and resources well, your life will likely be lived with rhythm and order. To the degree that you do not manage your resources well, you will likely live a life of chaos and anxiety. So how do most of us manage life? Now, you might be a little different than what I'm about to say, but I think what I'm about to say is fairly typical. Most people organize their lives around categories. And the most common categories include work, family, church, education, recreation, finances, and politics. And to each category, we allot a certain amount of our limited time, energy, and resources. And the way we do that is we ask questions like, how many hours am I going to work a week? How many weeks will we go on vacation? How much can we afford? What kind of vacation are we going to take? How much money am I going to give to my church, if I'm going to give any of it at all? How many weekends of the year will we be on the road attending our kids' baseball and soccer games? What degree am I going to pursue, and how long will it take me to obtain that degree? How big a mortgage can we undertake? And can we really afford that? And how many times a week can I play golf or do whatever your hobby is? And this is where life gets interesting and problematic, because there are more demands, more desires, and more expectations than there are time, energy, and resources. And so everybody kind of knows this. I mean, this is the problem with life. We all experience it, and it leads to the fifth principle of life, and that is that we all need an organizing principle. We need something that gets the most out of what we have. And this is fundamental to managing our lives. An organizing principle is what best answers our list of life questions, one that limits the chaos, limits the anxiety, and heightens our sense of rhythm in life. How much time do I give to my work? Well, how does my organizing principle guide me? How many weekends a year will we travel to follow the kids' sports leagues? What does my organizing principle tell me? How big a mortgage can I undertake? How does my organizing principle help me decide that? How much golf will I play? How much will I work out? How much time and energy and how involved will I get in my local church? How much effort will I give to climbing the corporate ladder? What does my organizing principle say? We need an organizing principle to order our lives because you can't work 24 hours a day. You don't have unlimited energy. You don't have unlimited resources. So we need an organizing principle that actually sets limits on the demands, desires, and expectations that we face. Y'all, something has to go. Right? Something has to give. Some things have to receive lower priority than others. It's called decision making. The sixth principle of life about how we manage is that most people, what we do is we move one of the categories into the organizing principle role. All right? So the problem is that when you make one of the categories the organizing principle for the others, it becomes more important than the others. So what happens is it tends to detract from the amount of time, energy, and resources that you have to give to one of the other categories of your life. Everybody in here knows it because we've all done it. We've all experienced this. So for example, let's say that you take work and you put work into the organizing principle role. All right, this is very common for us here in the Woodlands. Woodlands is a highly motivated, highly driven group of people typically who live here. And so let's just play this out. Let's say that you do this. Well, this means that you're going to give more time to work. You're going to give your very best energy to it. And what's going to happen is your work outcomes are going to soar. You're going to get promoted. You're going to get raises. You're going to have a sense of belonging and esteem. You're going to feel really good that you work there. You're going to end up liking that company. You're glad you're a part of it. You love the team and the people that you work with because it makes you feel like your life matters. But as you put work in the organizing principle slot of your life, what happens to your family? Maybe eventually your spouse begins to languish a little bit. He or she begins to feel like maybe you love work more than you love them and more than you love the kids. They may become jealous of the time that you spend there. They might even become worried that you'll meet someone there that you like more than you like them. Doubt begins to work its way into your relationship. And it can even get to the point where we could say really dumb things like, well, if he's going to find somebody else, then I'll find somebody else. Well, that's great. That really helps the chaos and anxiety go down. But we do that. What happens to the kids? Well, the kids love all the toys you can buy them. The kids love the fact that you can now afford to put them in the sports leagues with their friends, but you rarely attend a game because you're at work. They also become unconsciously aware that mom and dad are drifting apart. Now, they're not consciously thinking about this. They just become aware that you and mom and dad are just drifting apart from each other. They don't seem to love each other like they used to. And it's an odd thing. Whenever kids feel that in our relationships with one another, it makes them feel insecure. It makes them feel insignificant. And so they begin to doubt themselves. And they start to ask questions like, do I really matter to mom and dad? They don't know why they're asking these questions, but they can feel it. When you get home, of course, you're exhausted, right? Because you just gave your best time and your best energy to work. And so you don't feel like maintaining the house. You don't feel like going with the kids on all those wonderful trails and go hiking and biking through the woodlands. You're exhausted. You don't have time for that. The last thing you want to do is sit down and talk to your spouse. You've been talking all day long. You've been listening to other people talk all day long. And so you begin to drift. You just want to be left alone. Tension grows in your relationship with each other. This affects your intimacy. And overall, it just begins to affect your marriage. Your teenage son and daughter, they start to drift into other relationships. They're of that age anyway, but since things are not so good at home, they begin looking to their friends as sources of security and significance. And problems start to surface. Church, oh my gosh. Church is just one more thing to attend. It's one more thing to suck your energy. It's one more thing to beg you for your hard-earned money. I mean, let's just watch online. And that's okay, I guess, but let's do something else on Sunday morning. I mean, I worked all day, Monday through Saturday, and you know that by Sunday around 5 o'clock, where has your mind gone? Your mind has gone back to work and what you have to do on Monday morning. And so really, Sunday morning is kind of the only time slot you've got to hang out with the family or do something else. And so really, church is sort of the last place you want to go. All of this creates chaos. It creates anxiety. It becomes a burden. It gets heavier day by day. It gets heavier month by month. And so you need an escape, right? You need a little bit of relief. And so you start drinking a little bit more in the evening just to help you relax and unwind. You start spending a little bit more time on the internet. You start shopping a little bit more, or you start taking more time to get into your favorite hobby. But now, if you think about it, you might actually begin developing an addiction. You never would have thought you would have done that. And all of that only adds more chaos and more anxiety. You wake up one day and all of a sudden your life is completely out of rhythm. And it's unmanageable. And you don't know what to do. Putting work in the organizing principle role didn't work. So let's take work out of there and let's try another category. Let's put family in the middle. Let's make the family the organizing principle. After all, my family's not doing very well and it sounds a lot better. What was I thinking in the first place to put work? Of course, my spouse and my children mean the most to me, and so we put family in there. Or then we say, oh yeah, well, that's one. Maybe I should put church in the middle, because if we attend church more, maybe God will bless us more. Or maybe we take the ultimate escape and we move a hobby or one of our addictions into the organizing principle role, so that your hobby takes up all your time, energy, and resources, so that your addiction that you don't want anybody else to know about, and you keep that hidden, it takes up your time, energy, and resources. And the result is always the same. No matter which of those categories you put in the middle, life gets better, it feels better for a little while, and then it goes bad, and it unravels again, and it gets out of rhythm again. Some of you are sitting there right now saying, Witte, you're describing my life. How did you know? Did somebody tell you about me? You've been reading my mail? Why is it that it never works to put one of our categories into the organizing principle slot? Well, because all those categories are limited. Those categories, even though they're good, there's nothing wrong with them in and of themselves. All of those categories are limited. They're limited by your time. They're limited by your energy. They're limited by your resources. And so when we do that, have made something that is limited our organizing principle. And inevitably, this leads to more frustration, exhaustion, addictions, which only serve to increase the chaos and the lack of rhythm that we feel. And that's when we wake up at night, our hearts pounding, our minds racing, because we realize we've created a monster and we don't know what to do about it. Is there a solution, given all the demands, all the desires, and all the expectations? Well, let's read it again. Jesus said, "Therefore I tell you, do not be anxious about your life, what you will eat, nor about your body, what you will put on." Why could Jesus so confidently and absolutely say this. Is it really that simple? Just don't be anxious? Well, maybe it's not simple, but it doesn't have to be complicated. When we come to Luke chapter 12, where Jesus spoke these words, the scene itself is chaotic, as Jesus was surrounded by a huge crowd. Look at how Luke described it in verse 1. He said, "In the meantime, when so many thousands of people had gathered together that they were trampling one another." I mean, can you imagine that? This is like a rock concert. So many people crowded around Jesus that they're walking all over one another. It says he began to say to his disciples first, "Beware of the leaven of the Pharisees, which is hypocrisy." If you remember from my talk a few weeks ago, when we talked about being a Jesus follower, we said that the crowds were composed of three kinds of followers. They were composed of the curious who were there to get something from Jesus. They were composed of the convinced who believed in his teaching and thought, if I just live by his teaching, it'll make my life better. And then there were the committed who made Jesus the organizing principle of their lives. Luke told us in verse 1, that as the crowds were trampling one another, Jesus began to focus on his committed disciples. And so what he says in Luke chapter 12 was for their direct benefit. And just so I can summarize, to save quite a bit of time this morning, Jesus said this. Luke 12 divides very nicely into verses 1 to 12 and verses 13 to 34. In 1 to 12, he was saying to his disciples, if you make me the organizing principle of your life, if you build your life around me, he said there's the possibility it could cost you your life. Now, y'all, none of us feel that living in America today, but you realize there are millions of Christians who are experiencing what Jesus said today in the 21st century. But absolutely, Jesus knew how he was going to be treated, and so he said to his very closest committed disciples, if you make me the organizing principle, if you follow me at this level, if they're going to kill me, they could kill you as well. It could cost you your life. That's what he's talking about in verses 1 to 12. Then in 13 to 34, he also told them, if you make me the organizing principle of your life, it could cost you your livelihood. You won't die a quick death, you'll die a slow death. And that's like, boy, great news, Jesus. Thanks for calling us to follow you. I absolutely want to make you the organizing principle of my life. And then Jesus did the oddest thing. He told them in both these cases that even though they could lose their life and lose their livelihood, they still ought to make him the organizing principle of their life. And he told them why. In both cases, he told them, there is a God, there is a heavenly Father that is unlimited. He has all power, he knows exactly what's going on in your life, and he cares about you. You can trust him. To you put those into three big theological terms, he is omnipotent, he has all power, he's omniscient, he knows, and he's benevolent, he cares. He can be trusted. And the very nature of God was the basis of Jesus' absolute confident statement that we should place him as the organizing principle of our lives. So with that context in place, let's read it for a third time. Jesus said, therefore, because you have this God, therefore, do not be anxious about your life, what you will eat, nor about your body, what you will put on. Y'all, the word anxious meant to be apprehensive so as to become overly concerned about something. Now, we all know that if you're going to work through life, you're going to have to be concerned about some things, right? I mean, that's appropriate. The problem is when those things become too big and you and I become apprehensive about what we're going to do about them, and we become overly concerned about them. Like us, the crowds were made up of curious, convinced, committed people who were overly concerned about how to manage life's categories. And so Jesus told them, don't be anxious. And then in the very next verse, he told them why. Here's what he said. For life is more than food, and the body more than clothing. Life is more. Jesus said the reason they were anxious was that they misunderstood life itself. Life is about more than our categories. Jesus said when you make food, or when you make clothing, or when you make work, or you make family, or you make church, or you make politics about that's what your life is about. He said you are fundamentally misunderstanding life. And when we misunderstand life, we mismanage it. And it is a mismanaged life that leads to anxiety, chaos, and a life out of rhythm. Y'all, when we place one of the categories into the organizing principle role, life never works. Because life is about more than our categories. You mean life's about more than work? Some of you need to ask that question. Yes. You mean life's about more than my family? Some of you need to ask that question. Yes. You mean life's about more than church? Some of you need to ask that question. Yes. You mean life's about more than who wins the next election? Some of you need to ask that question. Yes. Which is exactly why Jesus went on then to make one of the most important statements in the New Testament. He said, and do not seek what you are to eat and what you are to drink, nor be worried. For all the nations of the world seek after these things, and your Father knows that you need them. There's that omniscience of God. He knows what you need. The words seek and seek after in these two verses are very picturesque words. They were hunting terms. They meant to pursue something or to hunt it down. And Jesus' implication was that when you and I pursue the wrong things in life, or to use our language, when we pursue or we make our categories the organizing principle of our lives, he said we are fundamentally after the wrong thing. Life is more than our categories. And y'all, misunderstanding that leads to a mismanaged life, which in turn leads to anxiety and a life out of rhythm. And so I don't want anyone to miss this. This is really the point of this talk. When we put a category in the organizing principle role, life will not work because the categories themselves are limited by time, energy, and resources. And yet, we all do this. Some of you are doing it right now. We've all done it. We take one of the categories and we put it there. And when we do, life never works. It doesn't mean there aren't some good outcomes, but inevitably, other things languish. Life is never what it was designed by God to be. And then Jesus uttered some of the most important words that you and I could ever hear. He said in verse 31, instead, seek his kingdom. Instead of seeking those categories, seek his kingdom, and these things will be added to you. Now, y'all, next week, Lance is going to unpack more fully what this means, but in these words are contained the key to a well-managed life. Jesus said, there is an unlimited God. He knows everything about you. He has all power, and He cares about you. And if you will make Him the organizing principle of your life by following His Son, He will bring rhythm to your life. How much am I going to work? How does being a Jesus follower answer that question? How many weekends are we going to travel to our kids' games? How does being a Jesus follower answer that question? How much money am I going to spend on my hobby? How much time? How does being a Jesus follower answer that question? How big a mortgage are we going to take on? How does being a Jesus follower answer that question? How much money am I going to give to causes I care about, including my church? How does being a Jesus follower answer that question? To follow Jesus is to seek His kingdom. And when we do that, the unlimited God who knows and cares about us brings rhythm to life. This is what Jesus said. And y'all, when we understand that, the anxiety that wakes us up in the middle of the night with our hearts pounding and our minds racing goes away. And so today, I'm asking you, what's in your organizing principle slot there in the middle of your life? What do you have there? Do you have work there right now? Do you have the worries about your finances there right now? Do you have your family there right now? Do you have having fun there right now? Is politics there for you? Is education there for you? What's there for you? All those things are good in and of themselves, but none of them are capable of bringing rhythm to life, because Jesus said life is more. So, everyone in the Woodlands, and of course it goes much broader than that, right? Everyone is putting a category in the organizing principle slot. That's what everybody's doing. Imagine what could happen, not only for your family, but for the people that you work with, that you rub shoulders with. If you and I understood how to live life with Jesus as our organizing principle, imagine the difference it would bring, the calm it would bring to your life, and the effect that could have on your relationships. It'd be pretty awesome. It dawned on me in our next series, we said, we build generations of Jesus followers who take grace to the world. But you know what? If our life is out of rhythm, if we're consumed with chaos and we're overwhelmed with anxiety, we're not building the next generation very well. And we will never take grace to the world, because we'll be consumed with our own lives, trying to fix them, trying to work them out. And that's why we need the words of Jesus so bad. Do not be anxious about your life. Life is more. There's a Father in heaven who knows, He cares, and He is very capable of bringing rhythm to your life. So y'all, that's what we want to see happen in our lives. Over the next weeks, we're going to try to help you understand how to flesh that out. I hope you'll be a part of this series with us.